She knocked at midnight in a silk robe. And said, "I can't sleep alone tonight." She knocked softly, not the kind of knock you give a neighbor, but the kind you give when you're not sure if you should be standing there at all. I opened the door, and there she was. Midnight draped itself around her like a secret, and she stood in the doorway wearing a silk robe that caught the light in shifting ripples, pale and fragile, almost alive. "I can't sleep alone tonight," she whispered, and the words seemed to hang there between us, heavier than they had any right to be. I should have said something, anything, but my mouth went dry. My heart kicked against my ribs as though it had been waiting for this exact moment, though I couldn't explain why. She looked at me the way people look at a road they're not supposed to take but want to anyway. Her name was Claire. She was in her mid-40s, though when I looked at her, the years blurred into something timeless. There was grace in her, the way she carried herself, shoulders squared as if life had tested her more than once. But behind the poise, there was something else, a softness she rarely let anyone see. And me? I was just the guy renting the downstairs unit for the summer. Early 20s, stumbling my way into adulthood. I had told myself 100 times she was simply my landlady, a neighbor, someone I should respect from a polite distance. But the truth was harder, quieter, and lodged deeper in me than I wanted to admit. I noticed her. Every glance, every half-smile when our paths crossed in the hallway, every unfinished word when she'd hand me my mail as if she was about to say more but never did. Now, here she was, close enough that I could see the faint tremble in her hand resting against the doorframe. "You don't have to let me in," she added quickly, as if she regretted saying anything at all. Her eyes flicked downward, and for a second she almost stepped back. "No, it's fine," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "Come in." She moved past me, her robe brushing lightly against my arm. That single touch, accidental, fleeting, felt louder than the midnight silence that surrounded us. My apartment was dim, lit only by the desk lamp I'd left on, but the room seemed to shift around her presence. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap like she wasn't sure where else to put them. I stayed standing a moment too long, watching her, before awkwardly sitting across from her. "Coffee?" I asked, though the words sounded ridiculous at this hour. She gave a small laugh, soft, broken in the middle, and shook her head. "If I drink anything, I'll never sleep. And I already can't." The air felt thick, like it carried more meaning than either of us dared name. I tried to look anywhere but her, but my eyes betrayed me. They kept finding their way back, to the loosened knot of her robe at the collarbone, to the faint line of tiredness under her eyes, to the way her lips pressed together like she was holding something back. "You're quiet tonight," she said after a pause. "I don't know what to say." "Neither do I." That silence pressed down on us again, but it wasn't empty. It was full, with everything we weren't saying. Her foot brushed against mine under the coffee table, so light it could have been an accident. But she didn't move it away. Neither did I. I thought of how absurd it was, her in her 40s, me barely stepping into adulthood. Yet sitting there, I didn't feel younger, and she didn't feel older. It was as though time had slipped out the door the moment she stepped in. Her gaze finally lifted to meet mine. It wasn't playful. It wasn't careful. It was raw, and it held me there, pinned like a secret I didn't want to escape. And then, a sudden sound. The creak of the upstairs floorboards, sharp and unexpected, broke through the charged stillness. She flinched, almost guiltily, as though someone had just caught her here. We both turned toward the ceiling, then back to each other. Either of us spoke. Her lips parted slightly, as if she was about to say something she'd regret. But before she could, the sound came again. And we froze. The creak upstairs faded into silence, leaving us staring at the ceiling as if the house itself might expose us. Claire's hand twitched against her knee, as though she wanted to rise, to leave, to undo the choice of knocking on my door at midnight. But she didn't. Instead, she exhaled slowly, her shoulders softening. "It's just the old beams," she murmured, though her voice was too thin to be convincing. She leaned back against the couch cushion, as if to claim the space she had given herself permission to enter. I nodded, pretending to believe her. But my chest was tight with something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or excitement, or that trembling in between where you don't know if what's happening is right or wrong. You ever feel the walls closing in on you at night? She asked suddenly, her eyes fixed on the dim lamp glow. Like the silence itself is pressing down? Her question startled me. Not because of what she asked, but because she was asking me, as if I could possibly understand what she carried. Sometimes, I admitted. Not the same way, probably. But yeah, I know what it's like to lie awake and not want to be alone. She turned her head then, studying me with that look that made my skin prickle. I noticed it before, the way she really looked at people, not just past them. It was unsettling and magnetic all at once. I thought it would get easier with age, she said softly. You know, the loneliness. But it doesn't. If anything, it digs deeper. The honesty in her tone pulled something out of me I hadn't expected to share. My girlfriend left last year, I blurted before I could think better of it. We were together for 3 years. She said I was too young to know what I wanted. That I'd figure it out eventually, just not with her. Her lips pressed into a line, but it wasn't judgment. It was recognition. People always think they know what's best for you. Especially when you're young. Do they stop thinking that when you're older? I asked carefully. She gave a short laugh, dry and without humor. No. Then they just start calling it advice. Something in the way she said it, almost bitter, almost amused, made me want to reach out. Instead, I shifted on the couch, my fingers curling against my knees. I tried not to watch the way her robe slipped slightly at the shoulder, revealing the curve of her collarbone. I tried not to notice the way her hair caught the lamplight, strands falling loose as though she had given up trying to tame them tonight. You shouldn't be here, I said finally, though my voice betrayed me by coming out too soft. I know, she whispered. But she didn't move. We sat in that charged quiet, her eyes flicking to mine and away again. Once, twice. On the third time, she didn't look away. People wouldn't understand, she murmured. They'd say it's wrong. You. She stopped herself, her throat tightening around the word. You're too young? I finished for her. Her silence was answer enough. But even as she said nothing, her hand lifted unconsciously, brushing her hair back, fingers grazing her neck. The smallest, simplest motion, and yet I felt it like a current pulling me forward. I leaned closer without realizing I was moving. She noticed, of course she did, and for a heartbeat she didn't pull back. Her breath brushed against my cheek, warm and uneven, carrying a faint trace of wine. Then she shifted suddenly, leaning away, as though the closeness had burned. This is a mistake, she said, though her hand lingered on the cushion between us, not retreating fully. I stared at her hand, slender, still, waiting, and before I could stop myself, I laid mine beside it. Not touching, just close enough that the heat passed between us. She looked down at the space between our hands, her lips parting just slightly, as if she might speak. But she didn't. The silence stretched. It wasn't empty. It was alive. Finally, she let out the faintest laugh, shaky and low, more like an exhale. And without looking up, she let her little finger brush against mine. Barely there. Barely anything at all. But it was everything. Her little finger brushed mine, and for a moment I forgot the house around us, forgot everything except that small, electric touch. I could almost hear the silence trembling between us, as though the air itself was holding its breath. But then, a sharp buzz split through the quiet. Her phone lit up on the cushion beside her, its glow harsh in the dim room. She jumped slightly, pulling her hand back, as if the vibration itself had caught us. I looked down. A name flashed on the screen. I didn't read it fully, but it was enough to see a man's name. She snatched it up, screen down, as though even letting me glimpse it would be a betrayal. Sorry, she murmured, her voice a shade too thin. She didn't answer. Just silenced the call and let the phone fall to the coffee table with a muted thud. For a moment neither of us moved. You don't have to explain, I said quietly. I wasn't going to, she replied, eyes fixed on the blank screen. The firmness in her tone was undercut by the way her hand trembled, the robe sleeve slipping further down her arm. We sat in the stillness, our breaths uneven, as if both of us were calculating the danger of sitting too close and yet unable to move apart. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Whoever it is, they matter to you. Her lips parted, but she hesitated long enough that the pause said more than words. They used to, she whispered finally. Not anymore. But people don't always leave when you need them to. Her honesty startled me, but what startled me more was how much I wanted to close the distance between us, to take her hand again, to promise her she wasn't as alone as she thought. Instead, I said nothing. My silence hung heavy, and she filled it with her own. You shouldn't look at me like that, she said, not meeting my eyes. How am I looking at you? That time, she did glance at me. Quick, sharp, as if she couldn't bear to hold my gaze. But she didn't answer. The quiet stretched, a taut wire pulling us tighter together. Every shift of her body, every inhale, every flutter of her lashes, I felt it too closely, too sharply. Then another sound broke the tension. A knock, sudden, firm, at the upstairs door. We both froze. Claire pressed a hand to her chest instinctively, eyes wide. Neighbor, she whispered, almost to herself. He's always forgetting his keys. We stayed still, listening. The footsteps retreated, the door creaked shut again. Relief came too quickly, like a drop from a height that left us breathless. Her laugh came next, nervous, too high. God, this is ridiculous. Yeah, I agreed softly. Ridiculous. But my voice betrayed me, thick with something I couldn't hide. She turned to me then, full, and for the first time she didn't look away. The lamp glow softened her face, but the weight in her eyes was sharp. I leaned forward before I could think. She didn't stop me. Our knees brushed. My hand lifted, hesitant, hovering near her jaw. She inhaled sharply, and I felt her breath against my fingertips. Her lips parted, not in words, but in something suspended, caught between refusal and surrender. The space between us collapsed into nothing but heat, closeness, and that dizzying sense that one wrong move would tip us into something neither of us could take back. I could have kissed her then. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But she turned her face just slightly, so my hand touched her cheek instead, palm warm against her skin. The intimacy of that simple touch was almost more unbearable than a kiss would have been. Don't, she whispered, but she didn't move away. Her skin was soft under my hand, her pulse quick beneath it. I lowered my head, my lips nearly grazing her temple, and for a heartbeat I thought she might let me. But she drew back, breaking the contact. Her robe shifted as she moved, the silk sliding over her shoulder in a way that made my throat tighten. She caught it quickly, pulling the fabric closed again, as though hiding from both of us. This isn't supposed to happen, she said. Maybe not, I admitted. My voice was quiet, but steady. But it already is. We stared at each other across that charged space, both of us resisting, both of us failing. And when the silence came again, it wasn't empty. It was the sound of a line we were already too close to crossing. The silence between us had become unbearable, not the safe kind, not the comfortable quiet. This was silence that pressed against my ribs, that made my hands ache with the urge to move, to reach, to close the last inch between us. Claire sat stiffly, her robe drawn tighter now, but her eyes betrayed her. They flicked to my mouth, then away, then back again. Each stolen glance was a spark, and my whole body felt like dry tinder waiting for a single flame. Finally, she shook her head as if to chase something away. You don't understand what this would mean, she whispered. Then tell me, I said, my voice low. Because I can't stop thinking about you. The words left me before I could stop them. It was the truth, raw and unshaped, and once it was out, there was no way to take it back. She inhaled sharply, almost like a gasp, her eyes flashing with something between anger and longing. "You're a boy," she said, though the words sounded forced, as if she didn't believe it herself. "I'm old enough to, you're not." I cut in, firmer than I expected. "Don't do that. Don't hide behind numbers." Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. Instead, she lifted a hand to her temple, brushing her hair back. The gesture left her vulnerable. Robe slipped again, the curve of her neck bare, her skin pale in the lamplight. I leaned forward slowly, giving her time to push me away. She didn't. My hand lifted, hesitant but certain, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. The silk of it slid across my fingers, and my pulse hammered in my throat. She closed her eyes at the touch. Just for a moment, but it was enough. "You don't know how dangerous this is for me," she said softly, her voice trembling in a way I'd never heard from her before. "Then why are you here?" That landed. Her eyes opened again, wide and shining, and I saw the fracture in her composure. She wanted to answer, but no words came. Instead, she leaned back against the couch, one hand pressing lightly against her chest as if steadying herself. I followed without thinking, leaning closer until my knee brushed hers again, until her breath mingled with mine in the narrow space between us. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "Neither is pretending it's not real," I whispered back. Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me, as if weighing every risk at once. Her hand lifted, not to push me away, but to rest lightly on my forearm. The contact was almost nothing, just her fingertips grazing my skin, but it sent a shiver straight through me. The seconds stretched. My hand slid, almost of its own accord, to her waist, fingers brushing the edge of her robe. The fabric was cool silk, but underneath, her warmth radiated, alive, impossibly close. Her breath hitched. "Don't say it and I'll stop," I murmured. My lips hovered near her ear now, close enough to feel the tremor in her body. She shivered. "I can't." That was all it took. I tilted my head, our mouths inches apart now, so close the heat of her lips seemed to burn against mine. She didn't move back. Her hand tightened slightly on my arm, holding instead of pushing. We stayed suspended there, the moment balancing on a knife's edge. Every heartbeat felt louder, faster, carrying us closer to the point of no return. And then a knock. Sharp. Sudden. At the front door this time. She jolted, pulling her hand back as if burned. My own fell away, and for a moment we sat frozen, breathing hard, our faces still dangerously close. The knock came again, louder. Claire's eyes widened, panic flickering across her face. "Don't move," she whispered, standing abruptly and pulling her robe tighter around her. I watched her walk to the door, every step breaking and rebinding the tension between us. Her hand hovered on the knob. She turned back to me, lips parted, her expression caught somewhere between apology and desire. And in that charged breath before she opened the door, she said the words that shattered me. "If I let them in, everything changes." Claire stood at the door, her hand on the knob, her breath uneven. She whispered, "If I let them in, everything changes." But when she pulled it open, there was no one. Just the empty hallway, washed in shadow, a faint draft curling inside as though the night itself had been eavesdropping. She stared into the emptiness, her shoulders rigid. I rose slowly, watching her, waiting for her to breathe again. Finally, she shut the door and leaned against it, her eyes closed, one hand pressing to her forehead. "God! I thought—" She cut herself off, shaking her head. "You thought it was him," I said quietly. Her eyes snapped open, sharp and startled. For a moment she looked like she might deny it, but the truth was already hanging between us, too heavy to ignore. "It was his name on your phone," I added carefully. Her silence confirmed it. I stepped closer, just enough to see the tremble in her fingers where they gripped the edge of her robe. "He's still in your life. He shouldn't be," she whispered. Her throat bobbed with the effort of swallowing the words. "But some people, they don't really leave. They linger. They listen." They make you believe you owe them something you don't. I felt a tightness in my chest I couldn't name, jealousy, anger, maybe both. Does he know you're here? Her laugh came out brittle. He knows more than he should. He always does. She pushed off the door, brushing past me to cross the room. Her robe grazed my arm as she passed, a whisper of silk, a trail of warmth, and I almost reached out without thinking. Instead, I turned, watching her pace to the window. Her silhouette against the glass looked both powerful and unbearably fragile. You think this is about him? She said suddenly, her voice sharper now. She whirled back to me, her robe shifting at her shoulder. This is about me. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have knocked. I shouldn't have. Her voice cracked before she could finish. Then why did you? The question stopped her cold. Her lips parted, but no answer came. Her hands twisted in the belt of her robe, knotting it tighter, as if binding herself to restraint. Because, she said finally, softer now, I couldn't stop myself. The confession hung there, trembling, and something inside me shifted. I closed the space between us, slowly, deliberately. She didn't step back. Her chest rose sharply, and when I reached her, I lifted a hand, not to touch, not yet, but to hover near her jaw. Her breath caught. Don't, she whispered again, but her eyes betrayed her, wide, searching, pleading in a way her words didn't match. You don't believe that? I murmured. Her hand rose, pressing lightly against my chest. Not pushing, not pulling. Just there, trembling, as if feeling the proof of my heartbeat under her palm. I'm afraid, she admitted. So am I said. For a moment neither of us moved. The window pane rattled faintly from the wind outside, but inside, everything narrowed to the inches between us. Her pulse flickered under her skin, her breath brushing the space between our mouths. I don't want him to hear, she whispered suddenly. The words made me still. He's listening? Her gaze flicked toward the ceiling. Sometimes I think yes. She swallowed hard. He used to. I don't know anymore. But I feel watched. Even here. Especially here. The thought of it, of someone unseen, lurking just above us, ignited something protective in me, something fierce. Without thinking, I stepped closer, pressing her gently back toward the window. Her robe shifted as she leaned against the glass, the cool pain at her back, the heat of me in front of her. Her breath shuddered uneven, her eyes lifting to mine with a look that was both defiance and surrender. This is too dangerous, she whispered. Then tell me to stop. Her silence was answer enough. My hand finally touched her face, brushing hair back from her cheek. She closed her eyes at the contact, her lips parting. The world outside might have been watching, but in that moment, it was only us, caught, suspended, teetering on the edge. And when she opened her eyes again, the fear was still there, but so was something stronger. Then don't let go, she breathed. Her words, then don't let go, still lingered in the room, as fragile as a thread and yet strong enough to bind me to her. I didn't move at first. I just stood there, my hand cupping her cheek, her skin warm beneath my palm, her pulse beating too fast. We were balanced on the edge of something we couldn't take back, and every second of hesitation only pulled us tighter toward it. Claire, I whispered. She closed her eyes at the sound of her name, her lips parting as though the syllables themselves undid her. We can't keep circling this, I said. My voice was low, rough. It's tearing us apart. Her eyes opened again, wide and unguarded. If we do this, there's no going back. I leaned closer, just enough that my forehead brushed hers. The contact was small, simple, but it made the air thicken, our breaths tangling in the sliver of space between us. Then don't go back, I murmured. Her hand, the one pressed against my chest, curled slightly, fingers gathering the fabric of my shirt. Not pushing me away. Pulling me in. I'm supposed to be stronger than this, she whispered. You don't have to be, I said. Her laugh was soft, broken. You're too young to know what you're asking for. Maybe, I admitted. But I know what I want. The silence that followed was not empty. It was charged, pulsing, every second a question waiting for an answer. And then she gave it, not with words, but with the way she leaned into me. Her forehead pressed more firmly against mine, her body no longer resisting but yielding. Her breath brushed my lips. My hand slid from her cheek to the nape of her neck, fingers tangling lightly in her hair. She trembled, but she didn't move away. "Say it," I whispered, my voice almost shaking. Her eyes lifted to mine, shining with something raw. "I want you." The words undid us both. I bent the last inch, closing the space that had tormented us for nights, maybe longer. Our lips met, not gentle, not careful, but desperate, as though we had both been holding our breath and finally exhaled at once. She clutched at my shirt, pulling me closer. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling the silk of her robe beneath my hands, the warmth of her body pressed against mine. The kiss deepened, unsteady, messy, human. It wasn't polished or perfect. It was real, a collision of everything we had been too afraid to admit. When she finally broke away, her forehead rested against mine, her breath ragged. "What have we done?" she whispered. "What we couldn't stop," I said. Her laugh came again, softer this time, almost a sigh. She tilted her head, brushing her lips once more against mine, slower, gentler, as though tasting the choice she had made. "This doesn't make the world disappear," she said quietly. "People will talk. He'll find out. Maybe he already knows. I don't care," I said without hesitation. "Do you?" Her silence stretched, but her hands answered for her, still clutching me, still refusing to let go. Finally, she breathed. "Not anymore." The room seemed to shift then, lighter somehow, though the risks hadn't vanished. What had changed was us, no longer circling, no longer pretending. She leaned back just enough to look at me, her expression stripped of defenses. "You see me, don't you? I always have." Her eyes softened at that, something unspoken passing between us. And in that quiet I understood, this wasn't just desire. It was recognition. A meeting of two people who had been waiting, in different ways, for far too long. I kissed her again, slower this time, less about urgency and more about clarity. When we broke apart, we both knew, whatever came after, we couldn't go back to pretending. And for the first time that night she smiled. The silence after our kiss wasn't awkward. For once, it wasn't filled with guilt or hesitation. It was just quiet, the kind of quiet that comes when the storm finally passes. Claire leaned into me, her cheek against my chest, her breath still uneven. I held her without speaking, my chin resting lightly against her hair. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, I didn't feel like I was chasing something impossible. I felt like I was where I was meant to be. She stayed like that for a long while, neither of us rushing to move. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "This shouldn't make sense," she murmured. I brushed my hand down her back, steady. "Maybe it doesn't have to." Her quiet laugh vibrated against me. "You sound so sure." "I'm not," I admitted. "But I know what I feel when I'm with you. And I know I don't want to let go." She lifted her head just enough to meet my eyes. There was still fear in hers, fear of what people might think, of what tomorrow would bring. But there was also warmth, and something like relief. "I've spent years worrying about what everyone else expects of me," she said. "Maybe I deserve one thing that's just mine." I took her hand then, slowly, weaving my fingers through hers. She didn't pull away. Instead, her thumb traced lightly over my knuckles, the smallest gesture, but it sent a quiet certainty through me. "Then let it be this," I said. "Let it be us." Her smile was faint but real. She squeezed my hand. The weight of the world hadn't vanished. I knew that. She knew it too. There would be whispers, raised eyebrows, maybe worse. But in that moment, it felt distant, something we could face together when it came. Right now, all that mattered was the closeness, the choice we had already made. She leaned into me again, and I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, pulling her in until we fit against each other like two pieces finally falling into place. The air was warm, her hair brushing against my jaw, her hand still locked with mine. For once, I didn't feel like I needed to say anything clever or convincing. Just being there was enough. Her voice broke the silence again, softer this time. You're not afraid? I shook my head. Only of losing this. Losing you? She exhaled, long and shaky, as though letting go of something she'd carried for far too long. Then she tilted her head up and pressed the gentlest kiss against my jaw. Not hurried, not desperate, just simple and certain. I don't want to lose you either, she whispered. I smiled, pressing my forehead lightly against hers, closing the last bit of space. Then we won't. We sat there, together, with the world outside still waiting, but for once, it didn't feel like it mattered. There would be time for explanations, for questions, for the complicated parts of what came next. But tonight wasn't about that. Tonight was about us, her fingers tangled with mine, the warmth of her body leaning against me, and the quiet certainty that, against all odds, we had found something worth holding on to. We didn't need to say the words out loud. The silence carried them for us. And when she finally smiled again, small, real, unguarded, I knew the answer without asking. She was mine, and I was hers. Together, we would figure out the rest. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?